Defense News. It's proudly sponsored by Navy Federal Credit Union. If you're a member of our nation's armed forces, the Department of Defense, or if your family is, we'd be proud to serve you too.
On this episode of Defense News Weekly, a report on a little-seen agency that provides critical information to the U.S. military. Step inside the Army Geospatial Center and Geospatial Lab. Next, the aircraft carrier Dwight D. Eisenhower returns home after a long deployment. Learn about the takeaways from the Ike's time at sea. Also, the former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff makes waves by predicting that a third of the military will be AI or robotics in a couple of decades. Hear more about General Mark Milley's comments. We also get a look at the UK's Advanced Armored Fighting Vehicle, the Ajax. Plus, a roundup of headlines from across the service branches, including the first veteran on a presidential ticket since John McCain. Also, continued coverage from this year's Warrior Games. Learn about one effort to give athletes and their caregivers more support. Head inside the Healing Hut. It's the latest in news and analysis from the Pentagon to the platoon, here on Defense News Weekly. Welcome back to Defense News Weekly. I'm Diana Stancy. If you're a service member and have ever had the blessing of knowing exactly where you are on the globe at any given time, day or night, or known where your enemy is, you've been the beneficiary of the work of a little-seen wing of the military, geospatial research. This wing of the military provides a wealth of intelligence that is at the basis of all kinds of missions, big and small, providing commanders locations of roads, topographic features, rivers, towns, military facilities, anything you can think of, even subsea features and weather patterns. Additionally, they can provide information to security forces on lines of sight and obstacles around sensitive areas. Need to know where to put your firebase or weapons depot in an unfamiliar land? The geospatial specialists give you all the critical info. We talked with members of the Army Geospatial Center and Geospatial Lab about their work recently. Here's some of what we learned.
Maps are a critical component in any decision space. Maps help us correlate ourselves to the geography, to other things within that geography that have relevance to us. We take them for granted a lot of times because we have a lot of electronic devices now that allow us to interact with maps, help us get to where we need to go, find things that we don't know exist in and around us, or help us become more aware of places that we don't normally aren't normally familiar with. So for us, maps within the Army context are a whole different realm in terms of how we apply those maps, how we create those maps, how we sustain those maps, how we update those maps. And there's not a great deal of understanding or appreciation for that venue. So what we do in this building, with everything around us, is actually we're the map makers for the Army. We're a little different than the National Geospatial Agency or other agencies. The analogy I like to use is NGA will get you from the East Coast to the West Coast, identify the big roads for you or the major obstacles. We care about the zip code. The Army operates in unique zip codes, if you will. We create those maps for those zip codes. We help the Army put those maps on the systems that they deploy with. We help them get the most out of those maps in terms of information, terrain attributes, features, things that are going to impede warfighting, mobility, maneuver, command and control, things that will help us maintain terrain overmatch. This organization is set up to deliver those products, that content for those end users at the lower echelons, tied to the big national agencies, but more focused on those lower echelons to be able to get them the effective data that will get them the objectives that they're interested in. One of the biggest challenges that we have within our environment is standardization. The data can be derived from different sources. It can come in different formats. And so what we've gotten really good at is, one, to create common standards across all our systems. So when I get data from another organization, I can consume it. One of the things that we get a lot of questions about is, well, what do you do with all this data? Well, it has many applications. as you can imagine, maps are really important for our business line. So I want to call your attention to something up here, which is a well-known site. It's the monument down in DC. We happened to catch this when we were doing a flight. There are a set of activities that drive national security events around the country, and we get the opportunity, based on being directed by OSD, to support some of those activities. One example is we get multiple requests from the Secret Service to do mapping in advanced preparation for security posturing for a presidential event. State of the Union, we've got a lot of upcoming events where the president will be speaking at Democratic conventions. We also have the Republicans speaking, doing things at their conventions. We'll be asked to come out and do some mapping. That mapping allows the security communities to be able to use the data and to posture for potential events, to figure out where to put their folks, to figure out where other folks may put themselves to cause harm. So when we did a collect for a recent event downtown, we happened to capture the monument because it was a beautiful day and we were flying over it anyway. And so what you're looking at is an exact replica, digitized, of the monument, both imagery and LiDAR. And what does that mean? It means that you've got a robust data set where every pixel on that image has a location, an X, Y, and Z coordinate. That allows for folks to take the data set, do measurements, do all kinds of other analytics, line of sight, volumetric, which road should we close off, which road should we open up, what is our escape routes, what is their escape routes. So we take great pride in supporting those events that occur on a national, at the national level all across the country. We've had the ability to support the African Nation Summit downtown, the APEC, which is the Asian Pacific Economic Committee out in San Francisco, a variety of events that the president is at, or when other dignitaries come in, we get called for to go out and collect this data because it's unclassified, shareable data used for security posturing. While our primary mission in the Army Geospatial Center is to support the tactical users, we get called on quite a bit to support Civil Works project. I'm sure everyone has heard about the Francis Scott Key Bridge, where the ship ran into the bridge fell down, and right now you've got a tremendous amount of resources being thrown at the bridge to be able to pull it back apart, be able to clear the channel and whatnot. Well, the Corps of Engineers is in the middle of all of that. Our team has been instrumental in that we have taken the drones out and we've mapped above the surface. There are other folks that are mapping below the surface. We are able to take those data sets and put them in something called a common operational picture so that the senior leaders, when they're looking at the status of the bridge, they are actually looking at three-dimensional models that were created from all of these different folks collecting, both above surface and below surface. So as a piece of metal, for instance, gets removed, an updated set of images start showing up on the screen based on the collects that are taking place on the ground so that the senior leaders can see what's happening, right? So we are creating live, if you will, updates of what is taking place within the Francis Scott Key Bridge in a thing called the Common Operational Picture for the USACE Emergency Response Operations Center that's actually managing a lot of this. Look, at the end of the day, we are geospatial nerds. We're very, very passionate about everything that we do here. Not just because we love the science, but we also believe in the mission, that the data has relevance for the mission. There isn't a senior leader out there that doesn't talk about a military topic without having some kind of map behind them. That map has to be made from somewhere. We are those map makers. We are the ones that make the products that those units are using to convey information about operations. We may not make every map because they have very smart folks within their operations center that make those things, but the data comes from somewhere, and that comes from us.
When we return, an aircraft carrier returns from a long deployment, and headlines from around the services. Don't go away. Welcome back to Defense News Weekly. The aircraft carrier Dwight D. Eisenhower is back at Naval Station Norfolk, wrapping up a total of 275 days at sea, most of it spent in the Middle East.
Victoria, Sophia, I'm coming home. Hey, Mom. Hey, Dad. I'm coming home, baby.
Hey, Mom. Hey, Luz. I'm coming home. I love you guys.
Hey Mom, coming home. I love you.
During the deployment, the carrier and its strike group were at the forefront of the action, shooting down dozens of Iran-backed Houthi missiles and drones on a regular basis. Officials claim this conflict is the most kinetic since World War II, and the crew of the Ike received the Combat Action Ribbon for their actions at sea. The award has rarely been distributed since the 1991 Gulf War, and is for sailors and Marines who actively participated in ground or surface action. The Eisenhower, which first got underway in October, also oversaw Operation Prosperity Guardian, a U.S. and international mission that launched in December to safeguard commercial vessels in the Red Sea amid Houthi attacks on shipping. The Ike's carrier strike group includes Carrier Air Wing 3, which conducted 13,800 sorties during the deployment, the destroyers Gravely and Mason, as well as the cruiser Philippine Sea. Welcome home. And in this week's headlines from around the military, is the future of the military more automated than you think? At a recent defense event hosted by Axios' Future of Defense Wing, former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Mark Milley, said he believes a major portion of the military could be an AI-driven robotic force. How big of a portion? Up to a third, he said, given the way things are trending. And this isn't in some distant technical future. Milley said transformation could come within the next 2 decades.
Say 10, 15 years from now, my guess is a third, maybe 25% to a third of the U.S. military will be robotic and will be, and this is land, sea, and air capabilities, and they'll be largely commanded and controlled and driven by AI-enabled systems.
And will this be additive, or you think 1/3 of today's personnel will be replaced by robots?
That's hard to say in terms of the actual numbers of people sort of thing, but
It's going to be a notable swath, clearly.
I think, it'll be a big change. It'll be a fundamental change. And I would argue that other nations' militaries are going to be similarly designed. But I think you'll see the numbers of human troops, right? Those will probably be reduced as you move towards robotic systems. So, like right now, for example, in the Middle East, Central Command is experimenting with robotic naval forces, surface and subsurface. The Air Force is experimenting with all kinds of unmanned fighter bomber type aircraft, not just the unmanned aerial vehicles that you see. The Army and Marines are experimenting with unmanned tanks and smaller vehicles that can be used in ground combat. But this is not yet here in the scale and scope, but it will be in 10, 15 years or so.
The former commander added that militaries worldwide are undergoing a major technological shift, and the nature of war is rapidly changing with it. And it's in the U.S.'s interest to be ahead of the curve when it comes to AI and robotics.
Combine robots, which will expand beyond drones to a pilotless Air Force, a sailorless Navy, a crewless tank, which is coming, in the next 10, 15 years sort of thing. Combine that with the enormous power of quantum computing and artificial intelligence, and you've got some real significant fundamental changes, and all those technologies are available to China, Russia, the United States, and many, many other countries. So the country that optimizes those technologies for military use is going to have a very significant and potentially decisive advantage in an armed conflict.
And in political news, the first military veteran since Senator John McCain is on a presidential ticket. Last week, former President Donald Trump selected Senator J.D. Vance as his running mate.
Donald Trump has picked J.D. Vance as his running mate for the 2024 general election. Trump made the announcement on Monday on his Truth Social platform. Vance was first elected to represent Ohio in the U.S. Senate in 2022. Vance once garnered national attention with his memoir, Hillbilly Elegy, where he described growing up in Appalachia. He's a graduate of Yale Law School and also a Marine Corps veteran.
Vance, a senator from Ohio, served in the Marines in the mid-2000s with a deployment to Iraq and worked as a combat correspondent and public affairs specialist. Next up, Chinese state television has released a video of joint naval drills the country conducted recently with Russia. In the footage, Chinese missile destroyers and frigates are seen in tandem with Russian vessels. The two forces performed coordinated movements and practice security operations. The operation took place in the Northern and Western Pacific and is the fourth time the two countries have conducted joint naval drills since 2001. And from our allies across the pond, the United Kingdom is in the midst of deploying its most advanced armored vehicle to date. It's called the Ajax, and a little while back, the British Army put it through its paces in some harsh conditions in Sweden. Here's a look at the winter trials and reports from troops on how the vehicle performed in a snowy environment. Check it out.
I've been driving the Ajax armoured vehicle for a year now. Driving here in Sweden has been different to Salisbury Plain, which I'm used to, because obviously that's just like mud and fields, and this is the complete opposite, it's just ice and snow. If you touch one of the snowbanks, you quickly find out that you see the snow kicking up from the vehicle. It's been quite an experience. It's probably one of the best things I've done so far in my career.
My experience using these weapon systems have been pretty positive overall. For me personally, this was pretty much my first experience on an armoured fighting vehicle. I was working with horses before this, it was quite a different role. Overall on the trial here in Sweden it's been fantastic. The weather conditions are at times challenging, but to be fair, the heating inside the vehicle has managed to kick in and keep us warm.
So the trials lead on from trials that have taken place in the UK to test Ajax in these new conditions. Firing on the move has been very successful out here. The crews have been hitting targets, and it's also proven the progression of building up that crew confidence.
So to manage and ensure the trials are conducted well, it's a collaboration of different organisations, both military and also civil contractors. The biggest challenge throughout has probably been the weather and ensuring that we work dynamically. The expectations of Ajax have lived up. The capability and capacity of the platform, I feel, is on an upward curve, and that we're just starting to see what it can do.
When we come back, Navy Federal Credit Union's Jeanette Mack is back with her latest tips on improving financial literacy. Welcome back. What is financial literacy, and why should you improve yours? On this edition of Money Minute, Jeanette Mack from Navy Federal Credit Union brings you tips on how you can be more financially savvy.
A recent study conducted by FICO found that 85% of Americans feel more secure about their lives when their credit score is considered healthy. This highlights the strong connection between successful money management and personal happiness, confidence, and your overall well-being, and most especially the importance of financial literacy. Financial literacy is defined as your ability to effectively use skills, strategies, and knowledge to improve your financial situation. In times of economic fluctuations like high inflation and rising interest rates, your money smarts are what can help you get through the tough times and into a happy place when the market improves. So take the time to learn about saving strategies and healthy credit usage. Develop good payment and repayment habits to establish a great credit score. And always give yourself a way to respond in a financial emergency by keeping a cash reserve. Resources for tips and guidance are endless online and from your trusted financial institution or a personal financial advisor. Take full advantage of all that's available to you. That way you can confidently face all of life's ups and downs.
Thanks, Jeanette. We'll see you next week. To get more coverage of military and defense topics, look through that heads-up display and check out militarytimes.com and defensenews.com for more headlines. And to impress your fellow drill sergeants with your knowledge of current events, sign up for our early bird brief, compiled each morning to bring you the most recent headlines. Lastly, if social media is where you find open source intelligence, follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and X, formerly known as Twitter. And until the government drops the hammer on it, we're on TikTok, so go find us there as well. When we come back, a unique feature at this year's Warrior Games. Learn more about the Healing Hut. Don't go away. Welcome back. The annual Warrior Games are an exhibition of strength, passion, and tenacity, shown off by service members from all walks of life. But they can also be a place of community and of recovery. From this year's event, we learn about one facet of the Games that can go overlooked: the care and healing needed by the caregivers for the athletes. Have a look at the Healing Hut and how it aims to serve a critical part of the military community.
My name is Lieutenant Colonel Stephanie Shaver, and I am Chief of Flight Medicine at Columbus Air Force Base. I'm still active duty, but for the past 7 years, I have been also involved in the Air Force Wounded Warrior Program. In early March, I was called that one of the family members, actually the wife of one of our Invictus athletes, took her own life. And she was what I call a keystone caregiver. She was somebody that led the way for all the families, all the other caregivers. She was well known by all the services. She and I became close over the last 3 years as she was at the Invictus Games, Warrior Games. So it hit me pretty hard, and I felt like we needed to do something for the caregivers and the families. So this is what I did. What we do is we bring somebody in and we just gauge their stress level or their level of discomfort, and then we just try and bring in multiple modalities to stabilize the vagus nerve and bring in that parasympathetic drive. So how do we do this? We have Warrior Canine Connection, which has their service-trained dogs, but they're kind of fellowship-trained in trauma support. They can do full body weight on people with anxiety or just needing that type of comfort to bring in and calm, that sympathetic, parasympathetic drive and calm people down. We have pulsed electromagnetic frequency beds. We have frequency-specific microcurrent. We have various lasers for pain. So a lot of directed energy. We have something called a Tenant biomodulator, which we can basically, through just mild directed energies, bring in the parasympathetics. We're stabilizing the vagus nerve. This is all evidence-based and has a lot of good data. It's just not routinely utilized in our current healthcare system. And my hope is that we just can influence more of our corporate military leadership, expose them to this model. I'm going to build out a talking paper and a protocol on this is not expensive. This is just a different way to look at stress, PTSD, all these people. For 7 years, I have had athletes with head injury, PTSD, you name it. It's all the same problem. Let's get after stabilizing this nervous system, bringing them back into harmony, and then miracles happen. And we've had just amazing transformations already just from doing that. That's my hope, that I can raise awareness. There's other things to do besides what we're currently doing and really move the needle. If this prevents just one more suicide, it will all be worth it. And we can all heal together.
Well, that's all we have time for in this episode. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next week.